Agreed. Kling 3.0 is a real powerhouse when it comes to video, but what about Image 3.0 Omni? Can it actually keep up with Nano Banana Pro? First of all, there's a basic question we need to ask. Why is Kling releasing two different image models inside the same platform? Doesn't that automatically create confusion about which one you're actually supposed to use? And there's another point worth mentioning. First, you attract users with Image 01, heavily promoting unlimited generations on the website, which surely convinced quite a few people to subscribe. And then, less than 2 months later, you launch a new image model that basically makes Image 01 and its free usage obsolete. Honestly, I find that quite surprising. Before I show you how to actually use the platform, let's look at a few examples first. You'll find all the prompts in the comments. I want to show you how Image 3.0 and Image 3.0 Omni perform, and what Nano Banana Pro delivers when given the exact same task. Without giving too much away, one thing is already clear. With its new image model, Kling covers the full spectrum, from completely unusable to almost perfect. I've carefully studied the prompt guidelines for both models, and now let's take a look at some of the results. After many hours of testing, one thing became clear to me. The new Image 3.0 model performs best when the prompt is built around a clearly recognizable real-world scene, a single cinematic moment, precise camera, and lighting descriptions, and a visually logical situation. You could also put it like this: mood beat structure. In short, a cinematic single frame with strong atmosphere equals strong results. A technical board with strict logic equals weak results. And this is exactly where we begin, with the Omni model. For these first images, I used two reference characters, a woman and a gorilla, and you can see across the board that Kling handles consistent character rendering with ease, no matter the setting. Whether it's a supermarket visit attracting curious shoppers, a relaxed mountain hike, a rainy day in the city where it would actually be interesting to ask the AI to predict what happens next with that car approaching from the left, a late afternoon in a cafe, counting steaks in a cold storage facility, a crash test environment, or a quiet trip out on the nearby lake. When it comes to pure image generation, you can check that box. Image 3.0 Omni clearly knows what it's doing. Let's stay inside the Omni model and start editing the images. First step, we replace the wooden boat with a yellow inflatable dinghy. Then we add a tropical island and a shark fin to the scene. So far, so good. Next idea, let's turn the temperature down to Ice Age mode. That works as well. And if we want to push it further and add a bit of humour, we can tell the AI to fill the boat with orange buckets full of fish and potted bushes. Technically, that's doable. But this is also where we start to see clear limitations. And actually, they already appear with the first edits. Just like in Image 01, existing image areas get heavily altered. If we go back to the original frame, you'll notice that the gorilla in the latest version barely resembles the initial depiction anymore. So I thought, fine, let's combine all the changes into one single prompt and start fresh from the original image. Maybe that will give us the final result we were aiming for. But since the AI doesn't remember previous steps, we end up with something that looks fundamentally different from the earlier version. The gorilla is closer to the original again, but the overall scene changes. Next, we instruct the AI, you can see this in the top right, to use the current image and simply change the woman's outfit, adding a life jacket, jeans, and a beanie. Once you're happy with the result, you can click Next Steps and Upscale, which noticeably refines the image details. If you ever wanted a depth map reference, just type in the prompt. Same goes for different rendering approaches. Comic style works, claymation style with that slightly marzipan-like feel works, and even a monochromatic CGI industrial visualization style is possible. One of the more innovative features, and it reminds us a bit of the multi-shot feature in Kling 3.0 video, is the so-called series mode. The idea is simple. You let the AI continue the narrative of your scene, either freely or based on a defined storyline. Here you see the original image, 3 fighters on their way into the arena. If I tell Image 3.0 Omni in a fairly open way to predict the next part of the story based on this image and generate 6 storyboard frames, I get these 6 results. Colour-wise, they're actually quite decent, and the story could work, but I had no real control over the outcome. So the next step was obvious. First, I created 3 defined elements: a gorilla, a gladiator, and a samurai. Then I wrote a specific prompt for each scene. Of course, the base image that sets up the entire narrative still matters. The result is this 6-frame storyboard. And yes, the story is now told more or less correctly, but the colours are completely off. What also surprised me is that the gladiator's helmet, despite being clearly defined in the element, gets interpreted differently from frame to frame. That doesn't really help. At that point, I'd rather stick with the grid approach in Nano Banana Pro that I used in another video. Abandoned ship, you might have seen it. So far, Image 3.0 Omni delivers solid results. But as I mentioned earlier, there are also clear challenges, sometimes triggered by the structure of the prompt, sometimes by instructions that are actually quite simple. To put this into proper context, Kling Image 3.0 wants to play in the top league. At least that's the ambition. I'm now showing you the Nano Banana Pro results side by side for direct comparison. Let's warm up with a strong base image. Gorilla and woman with a lantern in a misty moor. The fog gives the whole scene a mysterious atmosphere. First task, transform only the gorilla into a claymation figure. Then we relight the scene to increase the dramatic effect. With Kling, clear issues start to appear. Pay close attention to the woman's face. Light means focus, so the next instruction is simple. Make them smile, ask for snow, and you'll get snow. Nano Banana Pro handles all of this cleanly. Kling, on the other hand, tends to overdo it. Sometimes it feels almost absurd, and finally converting the scene into a Japanese anime style gives us this result. At this point, my conclusion is pretty clear. For editing tasks, Nano Banana Pro is the better choice. Now we move into the more complex territory. A long prompt demands structure, understanding, and interpretation. I'm using these ear pads as the base image, photographed with my phone. The structured prompt basically tells the AI, in simple terms, give me a 4-panel layout showing different representations, a concept sketch, an exploded view, a 3D render, and a well-staged product advertisement shot. Kling improvises. Nano Banana Pro defines. I ran the same kind of test with an angled city illustration. Kling blurs things together. Nano Banana Pro constructs. In another example, I used a character image and asked the system to turn that person into a building. This is where it gets really interesting, because the possibilities for architects, game designers, and others suddenly feel almost limitless. If you have an image of a castle, you can segment it and make it spatially readable. Even surreal transformations are possible. If you say this woman with sheep should become a building, Nano Banana Pro handles it without hesitation. The same applies to vehicle concepts, whether it's a futuristic combat machine or a speeder that feels like it belongs in a space saga. Unfortunately, I have to say that Image 3.0 Omni cannot keep up in any of these examples. Now let's take a look at what Image 3.0, without Omni, is actually capable of. I used one single prompt and ran it once in a neutral version and 5 times with different styles. Here you see the neutral, photorealistic result. Want a Ghibli look? Strong execution. The same goes for paper carving. Plush texture, Monet style, and ultra-flat style. In this context, again more like a single cinematic moment, Kling Image 3.0 performs well. But as soon as things become more complex, the same weaknesses show up. Once again, let's compare with Nano Banana Pro. This applies to the correct and complete rendering of text. It applies to technical diagrams that are supposed to explain how a washing machine works, ideally without errors. The knolling photo is decent in Kling, but the hex color is wrong, and the object's placement lacks logic for this kind of composition. Just look at the tent in the upper left. The next image is supposed to illustrate 5 hidden narratives through object clusters, and then it gets quite funny. The overall image is fine, but Kling seems to struggle with certain languages and fills in placeholder text instead. I also revisited the topic of industrial 3D visualization, and surprisingly, Image 3.0 can deliver solid results here. And finally, a scene inspired by a 1920s film. A man with a suitcase trying to reach a departing airplane. But if you look closely at Kling's result, almost nothing makes sense. Strange propellers, noodle-like rain streaks, and a perfectly smooth water surface, even though it's apparently raining noodles from the sky. A quick note on the difference between the two models. You could describe it like this. Image 3.0 Omni is basically an editor with a chat interface. Image 3.0 is a more classic image generation tool with easy access to style features. Now let's take a look at how you actually use both Kling Image models. First, the basics. In both cases, you start on the Kling homepage, the native platform. To launch Image 3.0, which you can see here on the left, either click image generation near the top center or select Generate in the left navigation. This takes you directly to the Image 3.0 interface. Make sure image generation is active at the top and that the new Image 3.0 model is selected underneath. Where it says Image Reference, you can upload up to 10 images. Your prompt goes into the input field below. There are two additional features here that Image 3.0 Omni does not offer: Styles and DeepSeek. Styles lets you prioritize a specific visual look. Only one style can be active at a time. If you want to change it, simply choose another option from the library on the right or use the drop-down directly in the prompt bar. The color green indicates what is currently selected. If you want to remove an entry, click the trash icon. The same applies to image references. The DeepSeek feature allows you to interact with the underlying LLM and brainstorm ideas with the AI, similar to working with ChatGPT. In the lower left corner, you'll find the settings panel where you define mode, aspect ratio, and the number of outputs. Your selection directly affects the cost. Now let's move to the right side and launch Image 3.0 Omni. You can either click the Omni Does It All button or select the Omni icon in the left navigation. Why Kling decided to mirror the interface instead of keeping things consistent is beyond me, because it forces the user to constantly rethink where everything is. First, make sure the latest model is selected. Click the drop-down menu in the lower left and activate Image 3.0 Omni. At the top, you'll see the chat area where all your inputs and results are documented. Below that are the so-called elements. These are predefined objects, characters, or environments that are meant to help maintain consistency across images. Next to that, you can upload images either from your device or via Select from History. You'll notice that Kling uses color coding here. Blue represents elements and green represents images. You can drag and drop these tabs directly into your prompt to control their position and meaning. That way you can clearly tell the AI what should act as background and what should be treated as objects. Just like in Image 3.0, you can use up to 10 references. In the settings panel, choose mode, aspect ratio, and number of outputs. Interestingly, if you compare both models at 2K with the same number of outputs, Omni costs twice as much. What costs 5 credits in Image 3.0 costs 10 credits in Image 3.0 Omni. Why that is, I honestly don't know. There are two more important differences. First, 4K. In Image 3.0 Omni, you can directly select 4K output, which is not available on the left side in Image 3.0. Of course, that increases the cost. But don't worry, even in Image 3.0 you can upscale to 4K afterwards. A small side note here, Image 3.0 Omni even allows you to upscale images that were already generated in 4K. Although the improvement compared to the original 4K version is only marginal. Second, series mode. You start by uploading an image and activating the feature at the bottom. Kling suggests a prompt along the lines of predict the next part of the story, based on this image, and generate 6 storyboard frames to clearly convey the story. But you really need to think beyond that and define both the narrative and the number of frames. If you don't just say predict but actually describe specific scenes, you'll get a more coherent sequence. As I explained earlier. One final detail, Kling limits the number of characters you can use in a prompt to around 1,400. Nano Banana Pro, on the other hand, practically lets you write a novel if you want. In general, Kling provides fairly extensive documentation for users, both for Image 3.0 and for Image 3.0 Omni. But there's something important to understand. I went through it line by line, and Image 3.0 is essentially Image 01 under a new label. You can clearly see that here. The Helpdesk for Image 3.0 Omni, on the other hand, includes a range of new features and practical guidance. It definitely makes sense to take a closer look at those examples, including the prompts, to really understand how the system is meant to be used. That's it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for listening. See you soon. Your channel, AI Now You Know.